Okay, so hi and welcome to Pilates Basics. My name is Jenna, greetings from Kos, and we are going to now take a closer look at what is Pilates actually all about, why you would like to do some Pilates, and how do we engage our core, because this is the thing what we talk about in Pilates, engaging the core so that we can move safely with good connection to our bodies and especially with good control. So in Pilates we want to do everything very slow, very controlled, compared to like a normal workout class where the tempo can be sometimes very fast. When the tempo is fast, we don't really have time to actually come into our body, to be mindful and see and really feel which muscles are working, what am I actually doing. So when we freeze the time, basically we slow everything down, we break the movements down, you actually start to feel those deeper core muscles working that may have not been working before. And for me personally, after not just learning Pilates but after practicing Pilates and just within the last year, I just feel a huge shift in my body. I really have started to understand how to actually, how to crunch. Sounds so simple, or like it's like a simple movement, what we do in a lot of workout classes, but why is it that we normally crunch like this, moving our head, or another type of movement where we do some weird things that we are not actually meant to do. But we just normally don't have that time in another classes and workout classes to actually break it down, to actually, to see, am I actually working my core here? It looks good if I'm like doing the movement fast, but am I actually working my core, or am I just putting too much pressure on my neck, for example? So Pilates is all about control and managing, improving your posture. Of course, if you're a beginner, you will also start to improve your strength with Pilates. If you have done Pilates already for a while, the main focus is really on stabilizing your body, starting to create more control, like insane, crazy control over your body and over the movements, the exercises that we do. And now I don't like to call Pilates a workout class or a training, because it shifts our focus maybe a little bit. So what Pilates is really all about, it's again being mindful in your body. We don't want to really even count repetitions. We can, yes, but a lot of times that also shifts the focus from the quality actually into the quantity. So that's why in Pilates the reps doesn't really matter. Some of the exercises, especially the advanced ones, are so hard that you cannot do more than maybe 6. But we have now taken a closer look at 3 basic movements: a crunch, back extension, and a hip bridge. And first, before we start even moving, we're going to find our Pilates stance. So let's get up, finding a standing position where you have your feet underneath your hips. So you can take 3 steps on spot where your feet land. That is your stance for Pilates. So hip width apart means this, not too wide, not too narrow, of course, underneath the hips where your feet naturally land when you take the 3 steps. Okay, we can bend the knees slightly, and then the most important thing I think in Pilates, there are many things but this is one of them, is this movement, that you get this into your body. When you understand this, we call this, or I call this in my classes, tucking the pelvis underneath. So what I mean with this is, of course, people are different, our spines are different. Some people are here, some people are more here naturally, or because we work too much on a computer, or because the hip flexors are tight, then we are here. But now we want to push the hips slightly to the front by squeezing the glutes so that the hips come underneath the shoulders. So this movement, we're going to also do this on the ground so that you can get the movement into your body, the same movement that we now do in standing, also when we are laying on the ground. So mat Pilates is here what we are talking about, means that we are going to lay a lot on the mat. So when you find the movement in standing, it may be a bit easier, maybe a bit more difficult to find the same type of movement on the floor. But we are here to practice now. So we're going to tuck the pelvis underneath, just slightly squeezing your glutes. And another very important in Pilates is tucking your ribs also in. So what I mean with that is I take my hips underneath the shoulders. I imagine that somebody's pulling me up from the crown of the head. And a lot of times what happens is this, without the arms. I'm just trying to keep my arms somewhere where you can see my ribs. So pelvis is okay, but we also want to bring the ribs in. We want to close the ribs in. So you can imagine that it's a flower. It's blooming, but we don't want it to. So we're closing down the ribs. I will show you again. How does it look like in my body? I tuck the pelvis underneath. I imagine somebody's pulling me up, but what normally happens is that the ribs start to flare. So what I do is I'm closing them down or in and down towards your hips, towards your hip bones. Okay, so we got the pelvis, we got the ribs in, and then a third very important thing for the foundation. So this what I'm teaching you now is the foundation for each exercise, for every movement that we're going to do in a Pilates class. Before we do anything in Pilates, a lift arm up, we first find this connection in our core, and then we start moving, if we move at all. Sometimes we just hold and stay still to really fire up those deep core muscles, like in a plank. But your pelvic floor is the third thing. On your pelvic floor, you can imagine that there is a little blueberry, and now you want to zip it up, or you can imagine you zip up a zipper in your jeans, meaning that you gently pull your belly button in, but not to an extent where you cannot breathe. So we're not taking a picture where you have to suck your belly in so that you cannot even breathe. Everybody probably has done that or knows somebody who does that. So pelvis, ribs, and then the blueberry. So what is the idea with the blueberry is that we want now the blueberry to lift it up with a lift it up towards the navel center, the belly button, without squeezing it. That's why it's a blueberry. So lifting it up, and that will lock your core completely in. This is a very, very, very strong position for me to do anything. I have a lot of control over my body when my core is engaged. Okay, good, let's start moving. So again, pelvis, the ribs, I'm lifting the blueberry up and rolling my shoulders behind. So it's easy to take the connection, or maybe not easy, you need some practice to find it in your body, but once you have found it, it's quite easy to find it here in standing. But once, as I already mentioned, we go down to the ground, we forget it very easily. But that's why I will remind you always for the core engagement. So this is called the core engagement. Engage your core, activate your core. Pull your belly button in is also what I will also tell you a lot of times. But remember, I don't mean by sucking the belly button completely in. We still want to be able to breathe. Breath is a very important thing in Pilates too. So let's practice now the breath. We're going to take the hands to the sides of the rib, fingers facing to the front, thumbs facing back. And then we're just going to breathe. But imagine now your breath is here. When you breathe in, your hands go wider, your fingers go wider apart, and then we breathe out. The fingers come closer together. Breathing in, breathing out. And now we want to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, and out through the mouth, like you would be blowing through a straw or fogging a mirror. Again, breathing in, widening to the side, and exhale, squeezing, getting all the power from your core. So with the exhale will always help you to get a little bit extra strength away from your core. That's why we really use the exhales, especially in that part of the movement where it gets hard, to help us to move. Okay, breath is good. Even when we breathe, we still want to keep, we don't want to relax here. We want to keep the core engaged, the blueberry up. And then the same breath, same engagement in the core, but just reach your arms up. And now the same thing. What normally happens is this. We start to bring the ribs to the front. Don't let that happen. Just moving your arms. Nothing else happens in your body. Breathing in. Breathing out. And then one more time. Good. All right. So that's really what I just taught you, is the foundation for everything what we do, as already mentioned. So now when we come down to the ground, don't just forget what I just told you. No, it's okay. Let's start with the hip bridge. So we are now doing exactly the same movement with the tuck in the pelvis underneath, this type of movement, but now laying on the mat. So come down onto the back of the body, take your heels nice and close, and then reaching towards your heels with your fingertips. You can almost touch your heels, but not quite. The feet are again hip width apart, like in standing. Knees are facing to the front, and we rest the shoulders down. From here, keep your hands by the side of the body. I'm just going to lift my hands up so you can see what's happening in my lower back. So when we lay down, normally when we are relaxed, there is a little gap between the mat and your lower back. We don't want to completely close the gap. Now I cannot put my fingers in. I want to leave a little bit of space, a little bit of air there. And this is called now the neutral spine, the same exact spine position that we had in standing. In standing, neither we were not doing it overly all the way here. This was not what we were wanting to do. We still kept the neutral spine, but engaging through the glutes, through the core at the same time. So from here, we find the neutral spine. We push the lower back gently towards the mat, and from here we start to now completely first press the lower back down. This is an exception from all the other movements. Soon we're going to do crunchies. I will tell you to do a neutral spine, but for now, just that it's easier for us to lift the hips, to tuck the pelvis completely underneath, we are pushing the lower back down and starting to lift slowly the hips up, one vertebrae at a time, rolling through the spine. And now I could come all the way here, but this is not what I want, because what happens in my ribs is that they flare out again. I want to close my ribs down. That means that I have to lower down a little bit, not too much. I can still keep the hips quite high, but I'm tucking the ribs in. And now this is my maximum. I cannot go any higher without starting to arch too much from my lower back. So from here, we slowly start to roll down. One vertebrae at a time, rolling down. So the middle of the back, and then last, the lower back touches the ground. You can relax your glutes, letting the gap there between the mat and the lower back. So you start to feel the movement in your body. And then we do the same again. Push the lower back down to the ground. Start to lift slowly, one vertebrae at a time, up to the top without compensating from the ribs. And then slowly lowering down, rolling down, really feeling how your spine goes slowly down onto the mat, and we release. Good. A lot of times we do this movement with arms overhead, but again, when we take the arms overhead, don't let go of the ribs. Tuck them in and lowering down. Also, even though Pilates is all about the powerhouse, the core strength, we don't just work out the core. Core is just the center where the power comes. And a lot of times we are also engaging so many other muscles in our body, like glutes and hamstrings right here. And just making that your knees are still facing to the front. We don't start to open the knees too much. Push through the inside of your feet so that the knees are facing all the way to the front, and then slowly lowering down. Okay, so this is now your first movement. Remember, always the same, tucking the pelvis underneath that we did in standing. Once you got that, you're good to go. Then we're moving on to the crunchies. So now, find the neutral spine, what I was already preparing you for, but then I decided to do glute bridges instead than crunchies. But now we don't want to push the lower back all the way to the ground. We want to keep just a little gap, a little one. Now resting your head on top of your hands, interlacing your fingers behind your head. And we want to now bring the elbows a little closer together. And why we do that is because that will help us again with the ribs to tuck the ribs in. A lot of times if the elbows are wide to the side, this happens to our body. So we start to arch the lower back quite easily. So focusing on tucking the pelvis underneath, ribs are closed. You can imagine that you want to now push the back side of your ribs down to the ground. Elbows a little bit closer together, resting your head. So the movement is coming from your chest. Imagine that you want to lift your chest up, not your head up. And then we slowly lower down. Your back, your lower back, stays exactly in the same position the whole time. Especially when you lift up, your lower back stays there. It's not arching. We keep it down, close to the ground, and we release, head also down. With the breath, exhaling out through the mouth to lift, inhale to slowly lower down. And remember, there is no rush in Pilates. You want to take your time. The slower you go, the harder it actually is. So you start to notice you cannot use any swing from the arms or from the head. It's completely the core that is doing the work, and I'm shaking. And then we lower down. Do a couple of times like this. We breathe out to lift. And it can be just a tiny lift. You don't have to lift that high. Again, actually it's better to just do a little lift, because I don't know if you can see, but when I lift myself up, okay, this is still okay, but what a lot of times happens is that I start to compensate from my neck. Sorry. So we want to keep the neck nice and long the whole time. That's why the hands are there behind your head, so that your head can really rest, be heavy on the hands. And then, good. So that is your crunch. I don't have to do many of them, and I can already feel that. So keep practicing them to really start to fire up those little muscles in your core, because that will help you enormously with your posture. The last one, what we're going to take a look at now in this video, is the back extension. So rolling over onto your stomach, take a look what I'm doing first, and then you can give it a go. So forehead comes down onto your mat, hands are resting by the side of the body, and glutes are engaged. That's important because that will help us to reduce load from the lower back. We're going to start with just by lifting our arms up, palms facing up to the sky, and then release back down. Lifting up and down. But again, even though it's a movement, or it's an exercise for the back of the body, so when we lift the arms off the ground, we want to squeeze the shoulder blades together. So there, you can imagine that there's a little ball between your shoulder blades, and you want to squeeze the blades together towards the ball, and then release. We exhale to squeeze and inhale to release. But even when we are laying down, this is not a relaxation pose. That's what makes it actually hard, because the focus is on the upper back, but it's also on the glutes and also on the core. The same thing what we did in standing, what we did before, hip bridge and crunches, we also do here, even though it's a completely different position. We are laying on our stomach, but we can still do it. Pelvis underneath, and especially the ribs again. We want to tuck the ribs in and down. So I will give you an example. How does it look when my ribs are not in and when they are in? So the arms, only lifting the arms would be the first option. Second option, if you want to progress, is to lift also your head, your upper body up from the ground. But I cannot go any higher than this without compensating from my ribs. I could go all the way high here if I let go of the tension of the engagement in my core. So now I don't feel my core at all, I just feel it in my back. And we don't want to go all the way here. Now we want to stay, we want to keep the core engagement. So this is the highest I can go. If I flare the ribs out, then yes, okay, it's more of a stretch for the back of the body than actually working out the muscles. That's why I'm closing the ribs down and then lowering down. Okay, let's do a couple of repetitions just to practice like this. And when you lift the arms up, imagine that you're lifting from your triceps. So triceps are lifting up, squeezing the shoulder blades together, ribs are in, gently pulling your belly button in with the idea of the blueberry, and then releasing down. We exhale to lift up, holding, and then slowly release with an inhale. Exhale up, pull the belly button in like you would want to lift the belly button off the ground. Of course you cannot, but just to give you a little imagination. So exhaling up, squeezing the shoulder blades together, lifting from the triceps, squeezing the glutes, keeping the ribs closed, belly button pulling in, and then lowering down. Nice. Okay, so these were the 3 movements I wanted to show you, and there are a lot of, or actually there is 34 exercises in the method that Joseph Pilates created. So that's where Pilates is actually originated from this method of 34 exercises. And then of course we have added some more, which is great because it's a great variety. It's nice to get creative, but the basics is really in those 34 exercises, which actually we just did the back extensions. That's the only one. A version of that is in those movements, but I wanted to show you these movements exactly because they are the things that we do in a lot of other classes too. And to understand these, especially these 3 movements, is very vital for everything else what we're going to do. Also in my workout, my training videos, in my Pilates classes. So yes, if you got any questions, please ask, and I wish you great fun with Pilates. Move on to the next video to actually get a nice good workout. Pilates, I mentioned I don't want to call it as a workout, but as a Pilates session for your whole body. Thank you so much.